Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So today I was on Facebook and I came across a few stories about the Trump administration. And I want to take some time to talk about these stories. So today I was on Facebook and I came across a few stories about the Trump administration. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I came across these stories and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk to you all about this. This is not going to be a long Google Hangout. And I know it's very late, so not that many people are going to tune in. I just would rather do it this way instead of having to, render a video, edit a video, and then upload a video. So instead of doing all that, I just felt that I would just come on here live and talk to you all briefly about this very important issue. And I know a lot of people would rather talk about, frivolous things like Jay-Z and Beyonce and all that kind of stuff, man. But sometimes you got to talk about things that really matter. And that's what I try to do on this channel. Every now and then you'll hear me talk about pop culture type issues. But for the most part, I like to talk about things that actually matter, things that actually impact our lives. And this is a very important story. I'm going to share my screen with you all in a second so that you can see what I'm referencing. This article about the U.S. withdrawing from a human rights commission at the UN. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so you have this story here. Just bear with me 1 second, everyone. Okay, so here's the story right here. This is from NBC News. It talks about how the U.S. is withdrawing from the UN Human Rights Council. And I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts from this article, and then I'm going to provide my brief commentary. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. So this article says that the U.S. is withdrawing from the United Nations Human Rights Council, citing chronic bias against Israel. It goes on to say that Nikki Haley, who's the U.S. ambassador to the UN, said for too long, the Human Rights Council has been a protector of human rights abusers and a cesspool of political bias. And then it goes on to say this, therefore, as we said we would do a year ago, if we did not see any progress, the U.S. is officially withdrawn from the UN Human Rights Council. And this comes at a time, as noted in this article, when the United States is being criticized for its human rights record when it comes to these immigrants, separating children from their families. As this article points out, nearly 2,000 children have been separated from their parents at the border as a result of Trump's zero tolerance policy when it comes to immigration. So as this Trump administration is trying to lecture people about being civil rights or human rights abusers, the Trump administration is abusing people's human rights. And not that there's any comparison between immigration and the enslavement of African people. One thing is similar, and that's the separation of people from their families, the separation of children from their families. It's absolutely outrageous what's going on with this Trump administration. And obviously, after this decision, you had Benjamin Netanyahu thank the Trump administration for withdrawing from the Human Rights Council. And, the Israeli prime minister basically said this. He said that Israel is the only genuine democracy in the Middle East. And people are ignoring these regimes that are that are violating human rights. Just glossing over the fact that Israel has been condemned by the UN on multiple occasions for violating all kinds of human rights. This article goes on to point out how Nikki Haley was complaining about how the Human Rights Council treats Israel worse than North Korea, Iran, and Syria. And it says the council is foolish and unworthy of his name, and it goes on and on. And I just want to take some time to share my thoughts about this situation. This is no surprise. I mean, what you have here is another U.S. administration that is basically a slave of Israel. Israel has violated all kinds of human rights. It is a country that is the biggest threat to peace and security in the Middle East. It is a country that has occupied territories of multiple countries. It is a country that is oppressing the Palestinian people. They've killed many people at the border between Israel and Gaza, innocent people, unarmed people, people merely protesting against the blockade of the people in Gaza. There's a virtual blockade of Gaza where that whole territory has been put into a situation where it is essentially an open air prison where all kinds of goods and services are blocked out of that country, causing the people to suffer greatly. That country, for all intents and purposes, is still occupied. Anytime somebody else controls your borders, controls your access to all kinds of goods and services, you can't be a free nation. You can't be considered a free territory. You are, for all intents and purposes, an occupied territory. Israel has violated all kinds of human and civil rights. Despite all of this condemnation, they continue to occupy Palestinian land. They continue to take Palestinian land. They continue to violate the Palestinian people's rights. So the world is right when they condemn Israel for its violation of human rights. But the United States, since it is a puppet of AIPAC, since it is owned by these Zionists, the United States has backed out of this Human Rights Commission. And I think that that speaks volumes. It says a lot about Donald Trump and the nature of his administration. And I'm going to tell you why it says a lot about his administration. Just bear with me 1 second. Hold on, y'all, 1 second. Shout out to Romero Styles. Peace to you. But yeah, I mean, it's a crazy situation, man. You have this Trump administration withdrawing from this Human Rights Council. And, you know, again, this is not a surprise. I mean, the Trump administration is owned and controlled by Israel. I mean, here you have this Trump administration that basically violated decades of U.S. policy by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, despite, you know, condemnation from key U.S. allies. This Trump administration has a go-it-alone mentality that is causing the United States to be alienated from its key allies. And that is detrimental to the long-term security of the United States. But it's no surprise. I mean, we can't be surprised that this Trump administration is backing out of this commission, you know, for a couple of reasons. This Trump administration violates human rights. Again, it violates human rights every day. And right now, what we see happening among these immigrants, how the United States is separating children from their families, that's a violation of human rights. When we look at this Trump administration's atrocious civil rights record, we shouldn't be surprised that they are violating human rights. We shouldn't be surprised that they don't want to be a part of a human rights commission. Anytime you have a Trump administration knowing about police brutality, knowing about all these unarmed Black men being gunned down by these police, but yet in the Trump administration's mind, that is not a priority. Police brutality is some local matter that doesn't matter to the federal government as far as this Trump administration is concerned. So we shouldn't be surprised that this Trump administration doesn't care about human rights. We shouldn't be surprised when we see this Trump administration suppressing Black voters, setting up a sham voter fraud commission that is doing nothing but trying to suppress Black voters. We shouldn't be surprised that the United States is backing out of this Human Rights Council when we have a government that is trying to do everything that it can to reverse the progress that was made under Brown versus the Board of Education and under affirmative action programs. We have a Trump administration that is trying to use the Justice Department to attack affirmative action, a program that has benefited many African Americans, that has opened doors of opportunities to African Americans. We should not be surprised that this Trump administration is pulling out of this Council for Human Rights. We shouldn't be surprised when we see that this Trump administration is ripping apart a safety net for the most vulnerable Americans, stripping away and reducing Section 8 benefits and food stamp benefits. We shouldn't be surprised at all by anything that this Trump administration is doing. This Trump administration is a disgrace. It is an embarrassment to the American people, what this country is doing. This Trump administration is ushering in an era of darkness. And this administration needs to be removed from power. It needs to be removed from power. We need regime change right here in America. This Trump administration is undermining Americans' security by undermining Americans' ties to various allied countries. This country is causing feuds with Canada, with Germany, with other key U.S. allies. And that goes back to this whole question of whether or not the Trump administration is a puppet of Russia. And I've done a video about that, and I hope that you all can check it out. When I get a chance, I'll post a link in the cards about how Trump is Russia's puppet. So we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, at the same time, you have this Trump administration, talking about human rights abusers, complaining about human rights abusers being on this council. This Trump administration defends one of the biggest human rights abusers in the world, and that's the state of Israel. This Trump administration is aligned with all kinds of brutal dictators. If we look at Saudi Arabia, one of the most repressive and oppressive societies on the planet Earth, an absolute dictatorship. But yet you have a Trump administration trying to lecture people about human rights. The United States has a long history of supporting some of the most ruthless dictators on the face of the planet Earth, but yet the United States wants to lecture people about human rights. And Donald Trump is essentially someone who aspires to be a dictator. Everything he says makes it clear that this man wants to have dictatorial powers when it comes to freedom of the press, suppressing the press when the press is speaking out against the lies and the misrepresentations of this Trump administration. When the media exposes this fraud, this charlatan called Donald Trump is talking about his fake news, talking about possibly going after the media and all that kind of stuff. This man has dictatorship type of tendencies. This man has praised dictators like Putin, but yet he wants to lecture people about human rights abusers being on that council. The Trump administration is hypocritical. I mean, this is the same Trump administration that heaped praise upon that dictator in North Korea. Why these Republicans complained about Obama meeting with America's enemies. They have nothing to say about Trump saluting the general in the North Korean army. They have nothing to say about that. They have nothing to say about this man, Donald Trump, heaping all kinds of praise on that dictator in North Korea. They have nothing to say about the Trump administration releasing a propaganda video in support of that dictator in North Korea. But this is the Trump administration that wants to lecture people about human rights. why it violates human rights, why it supports some of the most repressive dictatorships on the face of the planet Earth, why it's cozy with Putin. You know, this Trump administration that wants to lecture people about human rights abusers is the same Trump administration that wants Russia back in the G7. Russia, a country that's violating all kinds of human rights, a country that has invaded Crimea and seized its territory. But yet Trump has no problem with, you know, cozying up to these people in Russia, you know, bowing before Putin, literally saluting generals in a dictator's army. They had no problem with that, but he wants to lecture people about human rights abusers being on that council. This Trump administration is hypocritical. This Trump administration is a disgrace. This Trump administration is undermining America while lecturing people about putting America first. This Trump administration is putting America last by severing all these ties with key allies. So I just had to get this out of my system. You know, it's just crazy that this is the man that we have in power, that this is the man that the American people elected. They elected this damn buffoon that doesn't have a clue what he's doing. And he's going to put all of us in jeopardy because of his foolishness. But you still have people supporting this man. You still have these idiotic Negroes supporting this man, even though this man has made it abundantly clear that he doesn't give a damn about your black ass. But anyway, I'm going to go through your comments before I close out. I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I know it's late. Shout out to Light Bearer. Hold on one second. Yeah, I'm not understanding your commentary, but y'all could check it out. Shout out to Elaine Lloyd. Yeah, we're talking about politics. I'm talking about the United States decision to withdraw from the Human Rights Commission. Westwood said they're really pushing chaos. Absolutely. Thanks, Macom. You said great live stream. I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't want to keep y'all too long. I just wanted to get on here and just share my views about Donald Trump. Man, Donald Trump is a disgrace, and I can't wait for him to leave the White House. I hope that he gets impeached, and I hope that he's forced to leave that White House in shame. Because it's just a matter of time before everything gets exposed in terms of this collusion with Russia, in terms of these ties to the Russians. It's just a matter of time. Every day, this man is making decisions that are impacting America's lives. I mean, these tariffs that he's imposing against America's allies, that's going to have a devastating impact on our economy. And yes, it's our economy. As long as we live in this country, we are impacted by whatever happens with this economy. So, yeah, I mean, the prices are going to skyrocket and all kinds of things if, things don't get under control with this Trump administration. But this is what happens when you elect charlatans for presidents. This is what happens when you elect people with zero political experience. This man has never held public office, but yet these foolish, uneducated, uninformed, backwoods people voted this man into office. And each day we're going to see the consequences of it. Why these people are lecturing America, lecturing the world about human rights. They're violating human rights by bombing countries, bombing Syria. And it's just so outrageous, man. Bonafide 1970 said Trump is essentially feeding into his rabidly hateful, openly xenophobic, and willfully ignorant base. Exactly. That sums up his base. And as much as I don't agree with Hillary Clinton about a whole bunch of things, she was right when she described the Trump supporters as a basket of deplorables. She was on the money when she said that, because that's what these people are. They are deplorable. Anytime you separate children from their families and you think that that's some good policy for the United States, separating 2,000 children from their families, and then you got that buffoon, that right-wing idiot, Ann Coulter, talking about those are crisis actors, or those are stage actors. The children are stage actors and stuff like that. That is, it's absolutely outrageous, man. But this is Trump's America. Just bear with me a second. No, I didn't hear about that, Macom. You said, did I hear about the two Republican lawmakers that are pushing for a bill to criminalize the BDS movement? And what is the BDS movement? If you can let me know in the chat room. I'm not familiar with that term. Elaine Lloyd said, I think he was voted in because of his racism. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's true, because I think it's a consequence of people like trying to get back at Obama, trying to reverse the things that Obama had done, people expressing their outrage that the American people actually voted for African American. So people had anger. There was like a racist backlash to the election of Obama, much like how there was a racist backlash during Reconstruction when Black people gained political power. You had the racists, you had the white supremacists do everything in their power to reverse those gains. And that's what they have done by electing this man, Donald Trump. When this man got into office, he quickly signed a whole bunch of executive orders reversing all kinds of progressive decisions and orders that Obama had implemented. So this is a part of that legacy of racism. It's like when you move 2 steps ahead, racism knocks you back 3 steps. And this is just another example of that. Yeah, so Elaine Lloyd said, us U.S. leaving the Human Rights Council, Trump doesn't want to be bothered with human rights. Exactly, he doesn't want to be bothered with human rights. He doesn't want to have to deal with Israel being criticized by that council, and he doesn't want to have any parts of it, because like the U.S. tried to bully these countries into supporting Israel, basically trying to tell them that if they didn't support Israel on all these different policies, then they would not get financial aid from the United States, that they would suffer other kinds of consequences. But when the world stood up to the United States, when they stood up to that bully, that hair-hatted bully, Donald Trump, all of a sudden, you had the Trump administration decide to pull this move. And it's just a shame that the UN is so dependent on the United States, man. The UN should have more power than it does right now, because right now, I mean, it's like it's dependent on these powerful countries like the US. And it really doesn't have any kind of power to hold the US or any of these major powers really accountable for anything. So let me finish going through your comments. So people said the elites elected him at the last minute. That's what Westwood said in terms of Donald Trump being elected president. I mean, I don't think this is what I think. I mean, I often hear people say that these presidents are selected and not elected and all that kind of stuff, promoting these conspiracy theories. But at the end of the day, the American people voted for this man, and the electors in the Electoral College voted in accordance with the particular states that they represent. So this man would not be in power. The American people did not vote for him. If he didn't win all those states and flip a couple of states, he wouldn't be president. So we have to realize that we have the power to decide who these people are that become president. We need to understand that we have the power to decide who will be our senators, who will be our Congress people. And everybody that's listening to this live stream needs to take away one thing, and that's this. You need to realize how important it is to register to vote and how important it is to actually exercise your vote. Because when you don't exercise your vote and your rights, rights that our people fought and died for, you end up with these buffoons like a Donald Trump making these disastrous decisions that will impact the United States for generations. This man is doing irreparable harm to the United States. All right, so let me just go through your comments real quick. Oh, okay, I see. So Macom said it's the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. That's what BDS stands for. Yeah, I did hear about some politicians trying to ban that movement. And I heard about like some Democratic politicians, some Zionist Democrats who are trying to block that movement as well. Here you have a movement that's trying to use nonviolence to bring about change in the occupied territories, trying to bring about change without blowing up things, without shooting people. But yet you have these Zionists and their puppets and their stooges trying to do everything that they can to crush that movement, to crush that nonviolent movement. They're doing the same type of tactics that J. Edgar Hoover used against nonviolent civil rights activists like Martin Luther King. So, yeah, I mean, that's a very important point. And I want to look more into that, do a little bit more research on that, and do a video about it. But, I mean, the problem is you got so many weak and cowardly elected officials. They don't have the courage to speak up against Israel. They don't have the courage to speak up against AIPAC and all these other Zionist groups that pull the strings in Congress and pull the strings in the White House. They don't have the heart to do that, to call these people out for their treachery and wickedness and, just darkness and evilness. They don't have any courage to call these people out, man. And I'm just glad that the countries in the UN had the courage to stand up to this Trump administration and call Israel out for what it is. And, this is, again, another reminder of just how controlled this Trump administration is, how the Zionists literally control the Trump administration. And the funny thing is, man, this Trump administration bamboozled those white supremacists, tricked them, exploited them, used them for a vote. But at the end of the day, despite their alliance with these white supremacists, they're still controlled by the same Zionist interests that these white supremacists complain about. So let me continue on with your comments before I close this out. Again, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. Shout out to Water Sniper. Shout out to you. Shout out to Nagon11. So Water Sniper said, I'm glad you don't block people for simply just having a difference of opinion, unlike other channels. Yeah, I don't mind when people express differences of opinion, just as long as they don't disrespect me. So if you don't disrespect me, come sideways or troll or anything like that, I will not block a person. But if their intent is to troll, if their intent is to insult somebody, and to create a toxic environment, then yes, the first thing that I'm going to do is block them. But usually I don't have to deal with that. Like a lot of the people that come to my channel, you know, most of them have intelligent things to say, even if they disagree. And I have no problem with that. All right, so hold on one second. Yeah, so Elaine Lloyd said at first I was sure he couldn't win. I was too. When you look at the changing demographics in this country, when you look at the fact that you have a rising Latino population in this country, you have African Americans in this country, and you have all these other groups, and you have white progressives, especially after you saw Obama get elected and then reelected. I thought that it would be impossible for a man like Donald Trump to be elected, especially given his atrocious record when it comes to women, and women make up half of the electorate. I really thought that he had no chance of winning. And most of the political pundits thought he had no chance of winning. So a lot of people were shocked and surprised. And really, we shouldn't have been shocked and surprised, because this is America, after all, a country that was founded on racism, founded on slavery, founded on the genocide against the Native people. So we shouldn't have been surprised. This is a country that had you know, slavery for hundreds of years, a country that imposed Jim Crow for decades. So we shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised after we saw how the gains of the of Reconstruction were quickly reversed. We shouldn't be surprised by any of this. And Elaine Lloyd points out how she thought that checks and balances would keep this president in check. And to some degree, there have been some checks and balances. Like, you had his travel ban go before the court, and there have been some rulings that have prevented him from fully implementing that plan. And I'm sure that there are going to be other cases against this Trump administration. Lawsuits have been filed for his DACA policy, for his you know, trying to suspend Haiti's temporary protective status. So there are checks and balances. There are some checks in terms of things that the judiciary can do, and also the legislature. And that's, again, another reminder of how important these elections are. We have an election this year. We have the power to change the composition of the Congress. And if we can change that, we can fight back against this Trump administration's agenda. Because in order for him to implement most of his agenda, he has to have laws passed by Congress. So we need to make sure that we have people in there that are going to fight against Trump and the Trump administration's effort to take this country backwards, to take this country back to an era where blatant racism is acceptable, to take this country back to an era where people dominant ideology is one of xenophobia and hatred. Yeah, and I mean, this situation with these children, man, it's just absolutely insane, man. The children are being locked up, separated from their parents. And even some Republicans are condemning this. So I see that Westwood said vote locally first. I mean, you should vote locally, but you also need to vote in these federal elections. I mean, you got these people like a Tariq Nasheed spreading this misinformation, telling people that federal elections don't even matter and that people shouldn't vote. And these, you know, this fool actually had a don't vote campaign. But yet these same fools that were telling you and me not to vote are the same people on here whining and crying about Trump being a white supremacist. When I hear that kind of stuff, when I see that kind of stuff, I just want to slap these people upside the head, man. Because these people have huge audiences and they are misleading people. Anybody that tells you your vote doesn't matter, they are working against your interests. They are helping to suppress the black vote. Yes, local elections matter, but these federal elections matter too. Federal laws affect our lives. They affect what kind of health care we get, what kind of education we get. They affect all kinds of things like housing, civil rights, and human rights. So don't let anybody tell you that these federal elections don't matter. Yeah, and they go on 11 and said the terrible thing is that this lump of shit has a great chance of getting reelected. Yeah, that's true. You know, there are plenty of people that support this buffoon despite all these mistakes. You know, despite him undermining that Iranian nuclear deal that made America safer than it was before the deal, undermining America's connection with its allies by imposing tariffs against allies like Canada and other countries and Mexico and stuff. You know, creating tensions between these countries by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Despite all that, this man has a chance of getting reelected, despite him cutting all these vital social programs like food stamps, Section 8, despite, you know, him setting up this sham voter fraud commission, which was designed to suppress Black and Latino voters. This man will get reelected if we don't get out there and vote. We need to make sure that everyone in our circle is educated about these candidates, knows who's running, knows their positions, and actually votes in these elections. Because again, these people in Congress, they can make or break this president. You know, depending on the composition of Congress, they can actually start impeachment proceedings against this man. So Elaine Lloyd said she didn't think there were enough races for Donald Trump to win, enough races to help him get elected. And I feel you. I mean, a lot of us didn't think he was going to get elected for the reasons I stated before. Yeah, the Democratic Party is problematic, man. I don't see the Democratic Party as some kind of salvation for Black people or anything like that. But it's like when you look at the two parties, it's clear that these two parties are not one and the same. You know, despite the fact that the Democratic Party has its flaws, despite all of that, when you look at their positions on various issues that impact Black people, you can't say that those two parties are the same. One is worse than the other. But I think that we need to, you know, try to have alternatives to the Democratic Party so we're not so held captive by the Democratic Party and taken for granted by the Democratic Party. But I can't pretend like these two parties are one and the same because they're not. I think that anybody would have, just damn near anybody would have been a better president than Donald Trump. Daffy Duck would have been a better president, you know, than Donald Trump. Donald Duck would be a better president than Donald Trump. All right, so let me continue on. Yeah, so somebody said certain Latinos vote Republican. Yeah, that's true. Like Westwood said, like in places like Miami where you have the Cubans who are who tend to be Republicans. So somebody actually had the nerve to. So Romero Styles said, basically asked me if I'm against Donald Trump. And you asked it, what did Donald Trump do? What did Donald Trump do? Basically, why am I opposed to Donald Trump? And I'm going to sum it up real quick. But I encourage people to check out my video. I've done many videos about Donald Trump explaining why I oppose Donald Trump. I mean, this is a man who is a racist. To sum it up, this is a man who's a racist. This is a man who was sued for housing discrimination twice back in the 70s, sued by the Justice Department twice because he refused to rent to African Americans. This is a man who took out a full-page ad in a New York newspaper encouraging the state to impose or implement the death penalty against the Central Park rape suspects who were later exonerated, who were African American. And to this day, this man refuses to apologize to those brothers. This is a man who encouraged his supporters to attack Black protesters at his rallies. This is the man. This is a man who's made statements that are derogatory towards African Americans, who's talked about how he didn't want Black people counting his money, according to some reports. This is a man who, when referring to African Americans, says, that's my African American over there, or the Blacks. You know, he talks in disrespectful tones when he's referring to Black people. When he says, that's my African American over there, that's like saying, that's my horse or my dog over there. It's like a sign of ownership, like a slave master owning somebody. This is a man who doesn't view police brutality as some real issue that needs to be addressed. His own spokespeople said that affirmed that police brutality was some local matter. This is a man who's not using his Justice Department to impose consent decrees against these racist police departments. He doesn't believe in doing that. So as far as he's concerned, police brutality is not a real issue. This is a man who is doing everything in his power to fight against affirmative action, talking about using the Justice Department to undermine affirmative action. This is a man who set up a voter fraud commission whose purpose was to suppress Black voters. This is a man who is cutting benefits that substantially benefit poor African American communities, cutting benefits like Section 8, cutting benefits like food stamps. His idea of making America great again is by making poor people hungry again. His idea of making America great again is by making poor people homeless again. This is Donald Trump. This is a man who is not only doing those things. You know, this is a man who again is severing these ties with allies for all the reasons I said before. I'm not going to repeat those. So the bottom line is that there are plenty of reasons not to support Donald Trump. And those are just a few of the reasons why I don't support Donald Trump. And I have to ask any Black person that's supporting Donald Trump, what the hell is wrong with you? Why do you support a man who's made it abundantly clear that he doesn't give a damn about you? I can't support a man who separates 2,000 children from their parents. I can't support a man who imposed a travel ban against Muslims. I can't support that. I can't support a man that disrespects women, talks about sexually assaulting women, you know, brags about grabbing women by the vagina, says all kinds of disrespectful things about women. I can't support such a man. And I don't understand how anyone in their right mind could. So that's why I don't support Donald Trump. Yeah, I hear you, Water Sniper. There are these YouTube scholars, you know, these YouTube, you know, prison scholars like that character in Living Color that think they got all this knowledge. And they're basically questioning whether or not we were enslaved and asking these stupid questions like where are the slave ships and this and that. I mean, some people are so ignorant, they haven't even opened a book. All they do is watch things on YouTube. I've done videos like dealing with that issue, like with these people that say we're not African, these people who say there was no slave trade. You know, I have a video response to that guy, conspiracy guy or whatever. And, you know, that guy, Waka, whatever his name, Waka Flocka Flame, that guy who's talking about we weren't slaves and we were native people and all that other mumbo jumbo. Um, yeah, you have people that believe all kinds of ridiculous things here on YouTube without actual facts. And you got buffoons even talking about the earth is flat, despite all this proof that the earth is round. I mean, that's just how lost a lot of people are when they rely on YouTube for all their information instead of actually opening a book and studying something. Yeah, so let me move on. Again, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. It's late, super late. I just hopped on here. I just felt like talking about this. Um, yeah, it's like once Obama, yeah, you're right, Westwood. Like once Obama got elected, it's like these people just could no longer contain themselves. They could no longer contain their racism. It's like their horns began to show and their fangs began to show, and they showed us who they are with this vicious racism. You know, when this brother was elected, the first thing they did was question whether or not he was even an American. You know, they started to depict him and the first family as a family of chimpanzees and apes, monkeys, etc. Depicted him as a terrorist, as a witch doctor, and all kinds of other racist imagery. Treated him with the most disrespect. You had people talking about how he was bringing white slavery to America with his healthcare plan and stuff. So these people couldn't contain themselves anymore. And eventually that led to the election of this buffoon, Donald Trump. So yeah, I hear you on that. And then you had these incidents of police brutality and these vigilante incidents like George Zimmerman killing Trayvon Martin and a jury letting that man get away with murder. You know, they painted Trayvon Martin as a thug and all this and that. And it turns out the real thug is George Zimmerman. He's the one who's been arrested on multiple occasions for aggressive and violent acts. But yet they want to make it seem like the victim, Trayvon Martin, is to blame. Shout out to Pro Woman J. She says, thanks, or I'm not sure if it's a man or a woman. Can't really see your icon, but you say, thanks for doing this topic. I appreciate that. Yeah, Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate. I agree with that. She was a bad candidate. Um, you know, I thought Bernie Sanders was a better candidate for the Democratic Party. And Westwood said, what about Claude Anderson's theory about voting block and buying politicians with economics? You know, I don't have any problem with people pooling their resources to contribute to campaigns. You know, that's something that people should do. But this idea that voting should be put on the back burner and that we should focus solely on entrepreneurship, I think that that's ridiculous. I don't buy into that Booker T. Washington type of philosophy at all. You know, I think that we need to obviously try to do for self and build our own businesses, but we shouldn't neglect our civic responsibility. You know, our ancestors fought and died so that we could vote. They fought and died so that we could have some kind of impact on our lives and have control over our destiny. They fought for the right to vote. They faced the police. They faced the dogs ripping at their flesh. They faced the batons. They faced the Klan. They faced lynchings so that our people would have the right to control our destiny. That's what the right to vote is about. Being able to shape the policies that affect your lives. Like if you don't have the power to vote, then it's easy for those in power to create Jim Crow laws, for instance. That's how they were able to pass all kinds of laws that reduced Black people down to second-class citizens. So I understand the importance of economics, but anybody telling you that economics is more important than politics or you should put politics on the back burner, that's somebody that is leading you astray. That is somebody that's not really about Black empowerment. You know, change is affected through the electoral process and through the legislative process. And these people that want to ignore that are people that are ignoring reality. Bonafide 1970 said the Don't Vote campaign should be renamed a Slit Your Throat campaign. Exactly, because that's what it is. You are literally using, literally giving up your rights by not voting. You are literally putting the noose around your own neck and killing yourself politically by not voting. Because as long as you don't vote, you don't count. As long as you don't vote, you don't have a seat at the table. And you know what they say, when you don't have a seat at the table, more likely than not, you are on the menu. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let my people be on somebody else's menu. We need a seat at the table. And what better way to get a seat at the table than to exercise our right to vote, not just vote for the sake of vote, but put forth an agenda and demand that politicians adhere to that agenda. And there are plenty of groups that do that. Despite all this rhetoric you hear on YouTube, there are organizations, all kinds of civil rights organizations that have conventions that set forth their policy positions, that set forth their agenda, and they use that agenda to hold these politicians accountable. But we need more of that. Hold on one second, Sean, 1 second. Just bear with me 1 second. Yeah, you do have some Black people talking. I see Big Game, Orenthal James said some Black people want cuts of social programs. Yeah, you have plenty of Black people that, well, not plenty. You have enough vocal Black people that have no problem with cuts to these social programs. And I think that these are the kinds of Black people who have lost touch with the community. These are the kinds of Black people who cross over the bridge and they want to burn the bridge that they crossed over so that nobody else can follow behind them. These are the kind of Negroes that have that crab in a barrel mentality, just like some of these so-called Black manosphere folks who were celebrating the end of Section 8 and food stamps and all that kind of stuff, celebrating that because they had such animosity towards Black women. That's the crab in the barrel, short-sighted vision that some of our people have. Some of these ignorant people cutting the very programs that benefited them. Some of these people, if it wasn't for welfare and Section 8, these people wouldn't have had a place to live when they were kids. They wouldn't have had food on their table when they were kids. But now that they're all uptight and all arrogant and elitist, they want to look down upon the same people that they once were. That's the mentality that some of our people have. They got an every man for themselves type of mentality. And that kind of mentality keeps Black people weak. That kind of mentality keeps Black people divided. So Big Game Orenthal said white folks are not about to impeach their savior. Some white people probably want to impeach Donald Trump, man. All white people, many white people do not support Donald Trump. There are plenty of white people that don't support Donald Trump. Yeah, and that's a good point, Westwood. A lot of these women, despite Donald Trump's views towards women and his treatment of women, a lot of these white women continue to support him because their race is more important than their gender. Their bigotry trumps the sexism that they face under this Trump administration. Just bear with me. So Black Power 25 said, do you believe that if white people were extinct, we wouldn't have any wars? No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. There were wars, on the continent of Africa before white people. I mean, there were wars all over the world before you had white people invade various territories. So I don't believe that. I think that people will probably still engage in wars out of greed, out of a fight for resources and power and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, pro woman Jay said they're real close though. Both are bought off by corporations. Yeah, I mean, both parties are deeply influenced by corporations. That's actual facts. I can't deny that. They are both influenced by corporations. And that's one of the sad things about this political system, that corporations wield a lot of power over these politicians. But we have power too, and we just need to recognize it. And as I've quoted before, Prodigy has this song where he says, real power is people. And we just have to realize our power, man. Too often we surrender to this notion that there's something bigger and more powerful than us, not realizing what power we have. When we are united, we have power. If we vote as a block around a specific agenda, we have the power to make differences in these elections, on a local level and on the federal level. We have to stop having a defeatist type of mentality, a surrender type of mentality, a give up type of mentality, man. And we have to have a fighting spirit, use every means available to us to fight against this push to go backwards, this push to turn back the clock of progress in this country. Shout out to the real Aaron Collins. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Bonafide 1970. I appreciate the Father's Day shout out, and happy belated Father's Day to all the brothers and sisters. I mentioned that before in one of my videos, but I hope that you all had a blessed and happy Father's Day. We need to uplift the brothers, who are doing the right things and taking care of their families. Salute the fathers just like we salute the mothers. So Macomb said, what do I think about a Pan-African political party? Um, I do believe that we need Black political parties. And I think that in cities that are predominantly Black, we have the potential to control those cities with independent political parties. We don't have to be members of the Democrats or the Republicans. There are third-party options out there that we need to look into. And if we don't see any third parties that we like, we need to create third parties. And I have no problem with a Pan-African political party. Pan-Africanism is an ideology that we need more of in our Black community, man. As long as the Black community worldwide is divided into these different little factions based on where their slave ship landed first, we will never be empowered. You have a European Union where these Europeans unite. Why not have Black people unite against their common enemy, against common problems? Unite against neo-colonialism. They fear that. That's why they had to take out somebody like a Malcolm X or Marcus Garvey. They fear true Black unity, and that's on a global level where you have Black people in the diaspora and our brothers and sisters on the mother continent united as one. They fear that because there's power. If Africa was united, there would be no stopping Africa. With all those natural resources that the continent of Africa has at its disposal, if Africans were to harness those resources, control those resources, develop the technology to fully exploit those resources, there would be no stopping Africa. Africa would be one of the most powerful land masses in the world if the Africans were to unite worldwide. And if Africa was united and powerful, then Africans throughout the diaspora would be powerful. Africans right here in America would have power. Africans in Europe and in the Caribbean and other parts of the diaspora would have power if we had a united and strong Africa, an independent Africa. So yeah, I definitely support Pan-Africanism. African people, despite diversity, despite the fact that there are many African countries and languages and stuff like that, there are common bonds that tie all African people together. And we need to realize that. Yeah, and pro woman Jay said, remember, black folks were damn near getting lynched at those Trump rallies. Exactly. I mean, they were getting pushed around, punched, and all kinds of stuff. And that was because Donald Trump encouraged that foolishness. But yet you had these ignorant Negroes supporting this man. So Big Game Orenthal James said Bernie Sanders is a piece of garbage too. No, he's not. I disagree with that, man, because at a time when this man could have, done all kinds of things, he was on the front lines in the fight for civil rights in this country. Fighting to end segregation, risking his safety and his freedom, fighting against racism in this country. So anybody that calls him a piece of garbage is somebody that doesn't know the facts. Now, obviously, I don't agree with every politician on every particular issue. There are points of disagreement with Bernie Sanders, but to call him a piece of garbage is nonsense. Given his long progressive history and record as a senator, as a congressman, as a politician, I think that that's just factually inaccurate. To refer to this man who's a progressive, somebody who has fought against racism, that has a proven track record, I think that that's just inaccurate and wrong. Yeah, so you said the Democrats are going to have to put up a real candidate that has somewhat of a black agenda if they want blacks to vote en masse. Yeah, they do need to have a candidate that appeals to African Americans if they want to win over the African American vote. And that is a problem that Bernie Sanders had, like winning over the black vote, because, for some reason, a lot of black people identify with Clinton, which I don't understand, like why you had all these Negroes like so in support of Bill Clinton and his wife, when this man has an atrocious record when it comes to the crime bill and these policies that help contribute to mass incarceration, when this man had policies that dismantled social programs like welfare and stuff like that. I don't understand how black people support this man like that. But you do need somebody that can appeal to black candidates. We need to somebody like that. I mean, that was something that Obama was able to do. He was able to pull all these different groups together and fire up African Americans, encourage African Americans to come out in large numbers to vote for him. Excuse me, for him. And I don't know if there's any candidate right now that would fit that category where they could draw a large African American vote, but still be mainstream enough to appeal to white liberals and all these other different groups. That's what you need, somebody that has mass appeal. That's what you need to compete against Donald Trump. And I don't know who fits that bill. Like a lot of the candidates that I've heard floated, I don't think that they necessarily meet those high standards. And I think it's going to be harder for an African American candidate this soon after Obama has been elected. But then again, I could be wrong, because I was frankly surprised that Obama was elected. I was surprised that he won in Iowa and all that kind of stuff. I remember having a discussion with an intern where I was saying, like, he doesn't have a chance of getting elected. And I was proven wrong, and I've been proven wrong again, like with Donald Trump. I thought he had no chance of being elected. So I'm no longer in the prediction business. I just sit back and watch, because these elections are very unpredictable, man. But we need somebody that has, exactly those ingredients that you're referring to, big game. Yeah, that is odd, pro-woman Jay, that Trump is a white he's a populist, but yet he's a billionaire. Like, so how is he going to be? It's just amazing how he's able to cater to these people and make them think that he's a man for the common people and stuff like that, when he's anything but common, when he doesn't represent the common man. He's a billionaire, somebody that doesn't even identify with the struggles of real people. Yeah, and I don't know what firebombing incident you're talking about, Westwood, but I'm not one that's going to like judge a whole group of people based on one particular crime. I mean, that's no different from, somebody judging the entire Black community because of inner city violence that we see in certain communities. Assuming that all Black people are violent and that all Black people need to be dealt with. I think that that's problematic. Of course, like, I want to find out more information about that firebombing, and the people that were responsible for that need to be punished to the fullest extent of the law, obviously. And Bonafide 1970 said, as far as those of our people who actually support Donald Trump, sadly, many of us do so, who are self-defeating, self-destructive, do self-destructive and self-defeating things. And that's no different. Like, these people, yeah, and I'm not going to get into a discussion about these Hebrew Israelites and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole nother subject, for a whole nother video. I mean, there are problems with both parties, without a doubt. As I said before, but I'm not going to, rehash the points that I made before. Yeah, that's right, pro-woman Jay. They were going to take Uganda. The Zionists didn't care what land they got. I mean, they considered several different pieces of land to colonize and stuff like that and claim as their own. Zionism is a political philosophy. It's an oppressive philosophy. It's a racist philosophy that exploits religion. And people, I keep hearing people say George Zimmerman is a Latino. To me, that's irrelevant, that he's a Latino. People say that like as if that means something, like as if that means he couldn't possibly be racist. Some people use that statement to say that all Latinos should be condemned, or, we shouldn't fight for immigrant rights and all that kind of stuff. And that's something I don't support at all either. So Westwood says some people say Obama ignored our issues, but we as a Black people needed to have an economic agenda and be on top of local politics. I mean, as I said before, many African Americans did actually have an economic agenda and put together agendas every year, but for some reason people ignore that. And the idea that Obama ignored our issues is just false. I think that he could have done more, but he did not ignore our issues. And I've done plenty of videos on this, talking about, I've done articles where I explain why I'm voting for Obama. I've done videos explaining all the different things that Obama has done. And if I get time, I'll post a link in the card so I don't have to repeat myself here. But Obama has done plenty of things for Black people. Of course, he could have tried to do more. But we have to realize that he did face obstacles. And one of those obstacles was Republican obstruction. All right, just bear with me a second. Somehow this keeps bouncing around. 1 second. Just hold on 1 second. So someone asked, have I been listening to T West? I haven't listened to him in a long time. Like, I couldn't take him seriously after he started to support Donald Trump. You know, I don't know what's wrong with him. You know, I don't understand how any black man in their right mind could support Donald Trump, especially a black man who espoused separatism and, you know, this fake black nationalism. How in the hell are you going to go from that to supporting a man that is diametrically opposed to the interests of black people? I mean, that's just beyond my comprehension to understand how you make such a extreme transition. So I've stopped listening to him a long time ago. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I probably unsubscribed from him. Because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, anybody that's supporting Donald Trump is basically cooning. That's what they're doing. They're tap dancing. They're no different from those coons, Diamond and Silk. They may be more articulate than them. They may be more polished in their presentation. But at the end of the day, they are no different from those buck dancing coons, Diamond and Silk. I don't care who you are. I mean, if you're supporting this man who's made it clear that he doesn't give a damn about you, something's wrong with you. Yeah, so you got somebody saying there are plenty of people taking advantage of welfare, and that's why some people are against it, not just black people. You do have welfare cheats. I'm not going to deny that. But often what people want to do is paint welfare fraud as a black issue, when the fact of the matter is a lot of these people that are accused of welfare fraud are white people. And the overwhelming majority of welfare recipients are not committing fraud. The majority of them are in desperate need of assistance, desperate need for food and healthcare and all kinds of government benefits. So to cut them off because of a few bad apples is just fundamentally wrong. You know, this United States of America has plenty of money to give to the state of Israel, giving them billions upon billions of dollars. None of those politicians are complaining about that. Trump's not complaining about that. None of those right-wing Republicans or even Democrats are complaining about Israel receiving all that money. But yet these same people want to cut the benefits that feed the poor. These same people want to cut the benefits that house the homeless. And I think there's something wrong with that. Oh, Westwood, you're from Detroit. I'm originally from Detroit. I don't know much about that Africa town. I want to learn more about that. So if you have some links to any stories about that, you please post them, and you know I'll look into that. I may discuss that. Because yeah, we do need to have more Black entrepreneurship in communities like Detroit and Baltimore. Because as I've said in my prior video, Black people control very few of the businesses in the Black community. You go to these Black communities and you will see that majority of the businesses are owned and controlled by immigrants and white people. There's something wrong with that picture. Now, Westwood said Bernie Sanders was against reparations for Black people. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I don't agree with him on every issue, and that's one of the issues that I definitely don't agree with him on. I did a video about that during the primaries. I think that we need to ask every single politician that wants our votes, what is your position on reparations? That should be one of the fundamental things that we demand of politicians, that they support reparations. Yeah, Jalen said those racist Trump supporters feel bold. They feel like they can do whatever they want without consequence. Absolutely. I mean, you see it. They feel like now that they have a new white president, they can just say all kinds of racist things and do all kinds of racist things, unfortunately. Yeah, I already responded to this comment about Sanders being garbage. I think that's nonsense. And, I think it's nonsense to condemn, any white liberal like this person is condemning Tom Wise or whatever. I just think that that's foolish, just condemning anybody just because they happen to be white, even if they are progressive and even if they are championing causes that are important to Black people. I just think that that's idiotic to just cut off people simply because of the pigment of their skin when they hold positions that are in support of our community. Just like I think it's foolish to support somebody just because they're Black when they're holding positions that are hostile to the interests of Black people. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about with the benign neglect piece. You need to elaborate on that. Yeah, and I don't know why you're saying Kamala Harris. I know that there are issues with a lot of these Democrats being corporate Democrats and not true progressives. But to say somebody is trash is, extreme, man. You got to articulate yourself a little bit better and explain your position. And I don't know if you're trolling or what. You said Cory Booker is booty cheeks too. I don't know about that, man. I mean, there are issues with all these politicians, with these corporate Democrats, obviously. But I want to see who's going to be running for president. That's what I'm really interested in before I can, take a position. Yeah, that's a good point about those prison pardons. He is playing games with that, man. He's trying to use that to win over sympathy votes from Black people. And, we need to keep our eyes wide open and know what time it is and know, what this man is up to. Oh, okay. So you were talking about Bernie Sanders and reparations. You said I don't dig Bernie Sanders. I mean, for me, like, obviously I want all politicians to support reparations, but when I look at a candidate and whether or not I'm going to support them, there are various factors that I take into account, like their positions on other issues that are very important, like single payer and reforms to the financial system and all that kind of stuff. Other issues are also important as well. So I look at the total picture and I look at who that person is running against. I look at electability. So I wouldn't just write off somebody simply because they don't support reparations. But I would, I think that that's an issue that we should push and that we should demand that all politicians support. Yeah. So Discourse asked, what did I think? What do I think about Baraka, Jamu Baraka? I'm not really that familiar with him. If I'm not mistaken, that's the brother that ran with Jill Stein. I supported Jill Stein during the general election. And if I'm not mistaken, he was on the ticket, but I don't know as much about him. So I would have to get back to you on that. Yeah, Trump did play games by going to those black churches. That's a good point. Like he took some plays from the Democratic playbook, and you're right about that. You know, he went to all these buck dancing, shoe shining, ass kissing Uncle Tom pastors to get their support. And these people supported this man, despite the fact that he is not by any stretch an example of what, you know, represents Christian values or evangelical values at all. And that just exposes how hypocritical the religious right is, man. When you look at Donald Trump and his treatment of women, all the sleazy and foul things he said and done to women, but yet you have these quote unquote Christians supporting this man. It just exposes how hypocritical they are, how much of a fraud they are, how much of charlatans these people are. So Big Game Orenthal said if they don't support reparations, then what is the point? And, you know, that's a good point. You know, that's a good point. And I understand that. Like I said, I think that reparations is very important, but also there are other issues that are also important as well. But I hear you and I feel what you're saying. All right, so I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I know it's super late. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning here on the East Coast. So yeah, I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. And if you're feeling it, you know, share this stream with your friends. You know, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. Also, I want to encourage you all to subscribe to my second New Possibilities channel. When I get a chance, I'll post a link to that channel. So I encourage you all to subscribe to that channel. It has a little over 100 subscribers. I want to really boost that channel up, get it to comparable numbers as this channel. My second New Possibilities channel, for those of you who don't know, is dedicated to Black excellence. It talks about the accomplishments of Black people. Recently, I've done some videos about Black superheroes who have done great things and sacrificed so much for people. So I hope that you all can subscribe to that channel. Again, when I get a chance, I'll post a link in the description box and in the comment section. So look out for that. So I'm going to just check out these last couple of comments before I close out. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Peace and blessings to each and every one of you. And good night.